The dining room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of fried rice and grilled chicken. It was Tolu's 18th birthday, and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Adegbite, had spared no expense to celebrate. Her younger siblings danced to Burna Boy in the background, while Uncle Deji cracked jokes louder than the stereo. In the middle of the joy, Tolu smiled wide, wearing the crown of the first daughter, loved, smart, and deeply rooted in her father's heart. But the moment of joy was cut short when her cousin, Kemi, pulled out a white envelope and said, "Let's do that DNA TikTok challenge. Everyone's doing it now. Just for laughs." The room went quiet. Mr. Adegbite chuckled awkwardly. "What's all this DNA talk? She's my carbon copy, no need for such tests." But the teens were already buzzing with excitement. Tolu shrugged, trying to be trendy and unbothered. "It's just fun, Daddy. I'm game." Days passed. The kits were delivered. Samples were sent. Nobody thought much of it, until the results dropped in a group chat. Tolu wasn't just not her father's biological daughter. The results showed a 0% match with Mr. Adegbite. The family's laughter was replaced by a thunderous silence. And while Mrs. Adegbite stood frozen in the kitchen, her hands trembling over the sink, Tolu looked at the printed report, her world spinning. The man who raised her may not be her father. Or worse, someone had been living a lie. Tolu locked herself in her room, holding the DNA result in her shaky hands as tears ran freely down her cheeks. The report glared back at her, mocking everything she thought she knew about her life. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends who had seen the TikTok reveal video before she even had time to process it. "Fake life," one said. "Nawa 18 years of scam," another posted. Her head spun. Her father, Boba T, as she fondly called him, hadn't even called or knocked on her door since the news broke. And her mother? She'd been pacing the compound, face pale, lips dry, avoiding eye contact with everyone like a criminal awaiting judgment. By nightfall, Tolu tiptoed out of her room to find her parents in the sitting room, their voices low but tense. Her mother's voice cracked. "I swear, Bayo, she's yours. I can explain this. Something went wrong with that test." Mr. Adegbite's jaw clenched as he shot back. "Explain how a child that came from your womb doesn't share a drop of blood with me?" He grabbed his car keys and stormed out, slamming the gate behind him. The street dogs howled in response. Tolu watched from the shadows, heart shattered, realizing something irreversible had been unleashed. If her father didn't believe the result was false, then, did her mother have something to hide after all? The following morning, the Adegbite household was cloaked in silence. Mr. Adegbite hadn't returned all night, and the tension was thick enough to choke. Tolu sat on the edge of the sofa, eyes swollen from crying, still in her birthday dress. Her younger siblings had been sent to their aunt's house for some days, and the house now felt like a crime scene. Her mother, Ronk, stood by the window like a ghost, staring at nothing, one hand clutching her wrapper, the other holding her Bible, but even the word couldn't cover her shame today. Tolu finally broke the silence. "Mummy, if Daddy isn't my real father, then who is?" Her voice was dry, almost whisper-like. Ronk's eyes darted to her daughter's face, and for the first time in 18 years, she looked like a woman aged by secrets. "It's a lie, Tolu. That result is wrong," she muttered, refusing to sit down. "I was faithful. I loved your father." Her voice cracked as she trailed off, pacing again. But Tolu wasn't satisfied. She followed her. "Tell me the truth. I have a right to know." Ronk suddenly turned sharply, eyes blazing. "Leave it alone before you destroy this family even more." That one sentence echoed through the room like thunder. And in that moment, Tolu realized something even more terrifying. The truth wasn't just hidden. It was dangerous. By evening, the compound gate creaked open. Mr. Adegbite, Boba T, walked in slowly, his face darkened by sleeplessness and betrayal. His shirt was rumpled, and he smelled faintly of palm wine, but his steps were steady. Ronk rushed to meet him, trying to hug him, but he raised a hand. Don't touch me," he said coldly. Tolu stood by the corridor, watching him, hoping he would at least glance her way. He didn't. He walked straight into the parlor, picked up the DNA envelope from the table, and stared at it like it had taken his crown away. "I want another test," he said quietly. "From a hospital I trust. If that one too says the same thing, then all of you should be ready." Ronk burst into tears, falling on her knees. "It was just once, Bayo. It was a mistake." Tolu gasped. The words hung in the air like poison. Mr. Adegbite turned sharply. "So you're admitting it now? You slept with another man during our marriage." He looked like a man whose world had shattered. Tolu's voice shook as she stepped forward. "Wait, are you saying there's a chance I was born out of that mistake?" Ronk couldn't speak. Her sobs were loud now. Boba T picked up his car keys again. "We're going to the hospital tomorrow. If that girl isn't mine, I want her out of my house. I raised no bastard." And just like that, Tolu's heart cracked again, not because of a DNA test, but because the only father she knew had just used the word bastard. The next morning, the air in the Adegbite household was stiff with dread. Mr. Adegbite didn't speak a word as he drove, with Tolu seated quietly in the back and her mother beside him, dabbing tears with a handkerchief. The silence in the car was louder than any argument. When they arrived at a reputable hospital in Suralere, the receptionist barely looked up as she handed them the consent forms. Mr. Adegbite signed without blinking, and blood samples were taken from both him and Tolu. "Results will be ready in 5 working days, the lab technician said. 5 days suddenly felt like 5 years. Back home, the atmosphere was unbearable. Tolu spent her days locked in her room, scrolling through old photos of her and Boba T, birthdays, school debates, even the day he carried her on his shoulders after she won her first spelling bee. She wept over each memory, wondering how love could turn into rejection so quickly. Ronk tried to talk to her husband at night, but he no longer shared their bed, and he avoided any room she entered. The man who once sang to her in the shower now looked at her like she was filth. And yet, buried in all this pain, a question haunted Tolu's heart more than any other. If Boba T wasn't her father, then who was? On the 3rd night after the hospital visit, Tolu couldn't sleep. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in, and her mother's muffled sobs from the guest room didn't help. Desperate for clarity, Tolu crept into the storeroom, a dusty space her parents rarely entered. She dug through old cartons, yearbooks, and photo albums, searching for anything that might connect the dots. Buried under a pile of old baby clothes, she found a weathered envelope addressed to Ronk Adegbite in smudged ink. It was postmarked 2004, the year she was born. Heart pounding, she opened it. Inside was a single letter, handwritten. It wasn't signed, but the words were raw. "Ronk, you said we could never be, that your marriage must come first. But know this, if she is mine, I deserve to know. You can't bury blood forever." Tolu's hands shook as she read the note over and over. Was that me? She rushed to confront her mother, who looked at the letter and instantly collapsed into a chair. "It was before I knew I was pregnant," she whispered, voice cracking. "He was my ex, from university. I saw him once, just once, when your father traveled for that church convention." The room went quiet. Tolu leaned in, breath heavy. "Mummy, who was he?" Ronk hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "Akin, Pastor Akin Olarunfimi." The name hit Tolu like thunder. Not just because it was familiar, but because Pastor Akin was the head of her current church. Tolu stood frozen, her mind racing. Pastor Akin? The same man who had laid hands on her during anointing service? The same man who always called her my daughter in the Lord, with a warm smile? Her stomach churned. "You mean, my possible real father has been blessing me with oil and scriptures every Sunday?" she gasped. Ronk looked away in shame. "I never wanted you to find out this way. I begged God to cover it." But the secret was now out, and the one person Tolu had once trusted as a spiritual mentor might be her biological father. The next Sunday, Tolu wore a plain gown, tied her scarf tighter than usual, and walked into church like a ticking time bomb. Her eyes locked with Pastor Atkins as he mounted the pulpit, and her heart thumped. Every word he preached sounded like a lie. After the service, she lingered until the crowd thinned, then approached him in the pastor's office, clutching the letter. "Sir, do you know my mother, Ronka Degbite?" His smile faded. He took the letter, read it, and stiffened. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "Are you saying you're my?" He trailed off. Tolu didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked away. But she'd barely reached the church gate when her phone rang. It was the hospital. The DNA result was ready, and what it revealed would tear open every layer of their already wounded lives. Tolu's fingers trembled as she opened the hospital envelope in the back of the Bolt ride. Her mother sat beside her, lips moving in silent prayer, while Mr. Adegbite sat in front, arms crossed like a stone pillar. The driver peeked at them through the rear-view mirror, sensing the tension but wisely keeping silent. Tolu unfolded the results slowly, her eyes scanning the paper. Her breath caught in her throat. Paternity result. Negative. 0% probability of biological relationship. Her world shattered again. "It's true," she whispered. "He's not my father." Ronk broke down in tears, covering her face. Boba T sat still, blinking slowly, as if numbness had replaced anger. But just as Tolu was about to crumble, the nurse's voice echoed in her memory. "You also requested a second test, right?" She'd agreed, desperate to know if Pastor Akin was indeed her father. She reached for the second envelope. Her eyes darted to the result. Probability of biological relationship. 99.99% match. Alleged father, Pastor Akin Olarunfemi. The silence in the car turned deadly. Ronk screamed and tried to snatch the paper. Boba T, eyes wide, said nothing, just quietly stepped out of the car as soon as it pulled over. "So the man of God, the father of many spiritual sons, is the father of my only daughter," he muttered. Tolu's chest tightened. She didn't just lose a father, she'd inherited a scandal that could wreck an entire church. Pastor Akin sat alone in his office, staring at the photo of Tolu he'd taken during her confirmation class years ago. Now, the truth bled through his conscience like a leaking roof. She was his flesh and blood. His palms were sweaty. His past, buried beneath years of sermons and scriptures, had returned. The door swung open. It was Ronk. Her eyes were swollen, her scarf disheveled. "You said you'd let me go," she hissed. "You promised never to come near me again." Pastor Akin stood up, pacing. "I didn't come near. You brought her to my church." His voice cracked. "She's mine, Ronk. I have a right to know her." Unbeknownst to them, Tolu was at the window, listening. Her chest rose and fell as their voices clashed. "I raised her like my own child," Ronk said. Bayo wiped her tears. "He trained her. He gave her his name. You gave me abandonment and guilt." Pastor Akin gripped the window frame, silent. Just then, a knock interrupted them. Tolu stepped in. "So it's true," she said. Both adults froze. "I'm the product of betrayal and lies. A walking reminder of everything both of you tried to bury." Pastor Akin stepped forward, voice trembling. "Tolu, I want to be in your life." But she backed away. "You can't just walk into fatherhood because a paper says so." Her voice hardened. "You're not just my father. You're the pastor of the church I trusted. And now, I don't even know what's real anymore." Word had started spreading like wildfire through the church community. It began with whispers. "Pastor Akin has a child outside wedlock." But within days, it became full-blown scandal. Elders called for a discreet meeting in his living room. Ronk was invited. So was Boba T, who arrived stiff and silent. Tolu sat in the corner, watching the people who once celebrated her first Holy Communion now exchange side-eyes and low tones. "This is a disgrace," said Elder Cole. "A stain on the body of Christ." How do we cover this mess? Another elder hissed. You don't cover sin with suits and sermons. Bobber T stood up. Let's stop pretending this is about the church. I raised that girl. I paid her school fees. I missed job offers just to attend her PTA meetings. And now you want to hand her over like change. His voice cracked as he turned to Ronk. You didn't just cheat on me, you let me build a life on a lie. Ronk sobbed loudly. Pastor Akin bowed his head. I made a mistake. But I was young. I never knew she was mine until now. Tolu looked around the room, at the man who raised her, the one who birthed her, and the woman who shattered both, and whispered, What about what I want? Everyone turned. I'm not a burden to be passed around. I'm not a reputation to protect. I'm a human being. And right now, I wish I didn't exist. Her words landed like a slap. Silence descended, but it was the kind that came before a bigger storm. By the next Sunday, everything exploded. The church bulletin carried an unsigned exposé, typed in red ink, The Secret of the Shepherd, Pastor Akin's Hidden Daughter. Copies were slipped into pews before service began. Congregants read in horror. Some cried. Others whispered. And a few looked directly at Tolu, who sat at the back row with a scarf pulled low over her face. Pastor Akin stood on the pulpit with trembling hands. Brethren, I sinned. I was a man before I became a pastor. And I fathered a child outside of wedlock. But I did not know she was mine until recently. The entire hall fell silent. Then someone clapped. Another stood. Soon, the congregation was divided, some shouting, Step down, while others yelled, Forgive him. Outside, Ronk was already being hounded by church women who accused her of destroying a holy man's image. You should be ashamed. You used the pastor and deceived your husband. A woman even threw pure water at her. Meanwhile, Bobber T stayed home, refusing to be part of the circus. But the worst blow came later that evening when the church's executive council sent a letter to Tolu. You are advised to withdraw from youth choir activities pending further notice. Tolu stared at the letter, hands shaking. The very church she'd loved since childhood had now turned its back on her, not because of what she did, but because of who she was. And somewhere deep within, resentment began to rise like smoke from fire. Tolu sat alone at the back of the compound, staring blankly at the sky as mosquitoes buzzed around her. The rejection letter from the church lay crumpled beside her, forgotten like her sense of belonging. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to call herself. She was no longer Tolu Adegbite. The name carried pain. But calling herself Tolu Olaranfimi felt even worse, like endorsing the scandal that had swallowed her innocence. She had a name, but no identity. A mother who betrayed her father. A father who abandoned her. A pastor who fathered her but never raised her. And a church that treated her like leprosy. Later that night, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Bobber T. Come home. Her heart skipped. He hadn't spoken to her in days. She rushed in, finding him seated in the parlor, a glass of water untouched in front of him. He looked tired, aged. I may not be your blood, he began, eyes fixed on the wall, but I was there when you took your first step. I named you Tolyawani because I believed you were God's gift. Tolu burst into tears, collapsing into his arms. Daddy, I didn't ask for this. He hugged her tightly, whispering, You'll always be my daughter. But your mother. I need time. Upstairs, Ronk watched through the staircase rails, heartbreaking silently. The family was trying to heal, but she was the wound they didn't know how to touch. Just as peace began to return in small, cautious waves, a new complication knocked on their door, literally. Deli, Tolu's longtime friend and secret admirer, showed up in a white shirt, visibly nervous but determined. He stood in front of Bobber T and said, Sir, I know this is a strange time, but I want your permission to date Tolu. I love her. And I don't care about the DNA noise. Everyone froze. Ronk's eyes widened, Bobber T narrowed his gaze, and Tolu's heart nearly jumped out of her chest. "This is not the time for romance, young man," Bobbity said sternly. But Deli didn't flinch. "It's exactly the time. She needs someone who still sees her." Later that night, Bobbity and Ronk argued behind closed doors. "You've wrecked this girl's name, and now you want her entangled with another family that will judge her," he barked. Ronk fired back. "Love is all she has left. Let her have it." But even Tolu was unsure. Deli was sweet, steady, and bold, but his family? His mother had already warned him not to bring disgrace home. Still, something about the way he stood up for her stirred hope. But hope was fragile, and by morning, a video had gone viral. Someone had secretly recorded the church meeting where the DNA bombshell was confirmed. The caption read, "Pastor impregnates church member. Her daughter now his." Thousands of views. Hundreds of comments. One reputation gone. Now it wasn't just Tolu's name on the line. It was Deli's future too. By the end of the week, the pressure had become unbearable. Deli's mother stormed into the Adegbite home with a thunderous voice and a head tied high like a crown of fire. "My son will not marry disgrace," she screamed, ignoring Ronk's attempts to calm her. "We are respected people. You want to drag our family into this madness." She turned to Deli, who stood helplessly beside Tolu. "If you choose her, forget about me." Tolu swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. She had never felt so unwanted, so polluted. "I didn't ask for any of this," she whispered. Deli looked torn between love and loyalty. In the end, he followed his mother out, his silence louder than any goodbye. The same night, Pastor Akin received an official letter from the church board. He was to step down indefinitely for spiritual cleansing and public restoration. His wife, Mama Esther, hadn't spoken to him in days. His sons wouldn't return his calls. Everything he had built, sermons, followers, a global live stream ministry, was now reduced to dust. Alone in his prayer room, he held Tolu's childhood photo and wept. Meanwhile, Tolu packed a small bag. She'd had enough. Her identity had been weaponized, her dignity destroyed, her future left uncertain. She left a note on her bed, "To anyone who still loves me, I need space to breathe." By dawn, she was gone. The house was quiet again, but this time, it was an echo of loss. 2 months later, the dust had begun to settle, but the cracks remained deep. Pastor Akin had resigned completely, relocating to a quiet village parish where no one knew his name. Ronk now lived like a shadow in her own home. No makeup, no church, no joy. Boba T had resumed work, but never fully returned to his former warmth. He was present, but distant. Then, one Saturday morning, as he washed his car in the compound, he heard a knock at the gate. Slowly, cautiously, he opened it, and there stood Tolu. She looked different. Leaner. Calmer. Stronger. "I've been in Ibadan," she said softly, "volunteering at a school for orphaned girls. They didn't care about my surname. They just needed my heart." Boba T stood there, then without a word, opened his arms. She ran into them like she was 5 years old again. Ronk came out and collapsed into sobs. For the first time in weeks, the three of them sat together. "I still don't know what name I want to bear," Tolu said, holding their hands. "But I know who my real father is, the man who stayed. And Mummy. I may never forget, but I'm choosing to forgive." Boba T smiled faintly. "Blood may lie, but love doesn't." And in that moment, under a cloudy Lagos sky, the Adegbites didn't erase the past, they rewrote the future.